that require a vote, we can come back to, like the minutes. So, well, good morning and happy new year to each and every one of you. I hope 2022 is starting off well, in good spirits, but I know, I mean, and you know, Linda and I were just talking that we know it, particularly for our early childhood providers, it's still really a difficult time. So we're really champion you and obviously our families and children. So just thank you all for being here and making some time for us to come together for this meeting. And obviously, as usual, if you do the next slide before, are we able to work the slides?
Yeah, Katie.
Just a quick reminder, obviously feel free in the chat box to include your name, agency, title, role, and anything that may be helpful for the group to know about you or other situations about you. So feel free to use the chat box, and thank you for those who've already said hello, welcome, and introduced themselves. Appreciate that. So again, we have been doing this now. What is this? Are we in our, going into our second year? I can't keep count anymore. So we know sort of the virtual meeting protocols. Next slide, please. Obviously mute as much as possible unless speaking, camera on as much as feasible, because we're trying to obviously recreate being together in person, which now feels like it was forever ago in 2019, right? So, but when possible, please use your camera and keep it on. Again, use the chat box at any time for comments and questions. And also feel free to use your reactions button with your hands up if you want. And we'll be monitoring the chat as well as keep a note of those who may have their hands up. And of course, if you're on the phone and you don't have access to all of these reaction buttons, feel free to unmute and just let us know you're trying to get in, but we'll try to monitor those who may be on the phone and not on their video. And so, of course, as usual, we are live streaming. Just to remind you, we're live streaming for others as well. So just to be mindful of that. So obviously be patient for those who are both in Zoom and in live stream, that there may be some technical difficulties. So just be patient with us and give us some grace. And of course, if you have to leave early and you have not let Linda and or Melinda know, please let them know. I know some people have already done that because of some other competing meetings. Please let her know, just because we may end up needing to make sure we have quorum and for voting as well. Okay, any questions about our starting off? And then just to remind us, next slide, please, about sort of our meeting objectives. Today we have it's been a little while, so we have a little bit of agenda, so bear with us here. We want to obviously eventually, when we have quorum, we want to approve our meeting notes. And of course, we're always eagerly awaiting program updates. We'll also receive a program review as well as a review request for program growth. And then the team will also share survey data about the school year 2022 hazard pay, as well as discuss future program guidelines. So we have a little bit of a busy agenda today, but I think it's going to be, you know, fun, informative, and we're so looking forward to all of your comments and your thoughts and your feedback.
So we don't have a quorum yet, Yelma.
Okay.
So
okay, yeah. So okay, I was going to ask you. Okay.
Yeah.
But any question? Okay. So, but before we kind of jump in to sort of, we'll move from we won't do the approval of the meeting notes, but any questions or comments to this agenda or at least the meeting objectives? Just give a space for people to. There was a lot there, so just give people a little bit of second to see if there's anything else that we should be thinking about for this particular meeting. Okay, so with that, we'll move. I'll head it back to Linda and team. We won't approve our minutes until we have quorum, but we can move ahead to get some of the program updates and other matters that do not require quorum. Passing it to you, Linda.
Yeah. Okay. So next slide. We almost have a quorum, but not quite. And we appreciate all of you who've been able to join us. Katie, can you move to the next slide? Okay, so you received a handout with overall program updates, like the typical full program updates that we do. And we're going to ask Jenna Fuchs, our Durham PreK manager, to review some of the highlights from the update. You'll recall that you met her. She joined us in November, I believe it was. Time's flying.
Thanks, Linda. Good morning, everyone. Good to see you all. Yeah, so some highlights on there that we just wanted to draw your attention to we have for outreach an upcoming family info session on February 5th. That will be offered in English and Spanish, and open to everyone to sort of prepare them for the application. That will be live February 8th. So that session will really just focus on the application process and walking folks through that and making sure that they can get their questions answered and knowing where to go to for support during that process. And also well, Linda, I don't want to jump ahead because I don't know if we're talking about outreach further on.
Yes, we are talking about it further. Yeah, so the handout is pretty self-explanatory. If you find that you have some particular questions, typically we do this handout to use for updating our commissioners as well as our school board members, as well as you about overall program format. So, all right. Katie, can you move to the next slide? Okay, so we're going to ask Marina Mendoza. Dr. Mendoza joined us a little while back, September, as our Senior Director for Scholarship. We're going to ask her to give us an update on the recent Quality Subcommittee meeting work. We appreciate her leading that subcommittee for us, and we appreciate those of you who are on it, as well as other members of the community that are in that group. Marina?
Great. Thank you. Yes, so I'll also first start by saying thank you to the Quality Subcommittee members for their engagement this last week when we met, and also their invaluable input. So last week when we met, we sort of went over the equity plan to see what's in motion and what needs a little bit of a nudge. And so there are a couple areas that are rolling along, such as RAP care, and along with that, the transportation needs that families have highlighted in several of our evaluations. So updating that, so we are in the process of writing a white paper for the RAP care, and then hope to bring to the governance committee some strategies and approaches for you all to have input, feedback, and give us guidance on that. Another area that is also rolling and seems to be pretty successful is providing equity-based professional development sessions for teachers and directors. They are well attended and well received. And I think the next step that the Quality Subcommittee members are thinking about is how do we measure and know that some of those pieces are actually being implemented in the classroom. And so we're excited to kind of continue that work with DPK providers. And then the two areas that are sort of slower moving, but we spent a lot of time brainstorming and thinking about are how to increase the number of Spanish-speaking teachers of Latinx or Hispanic backgrounds. And we came up with some good directions that we may be going into, such as tapping into pipelines that are already happening around the city. So at Durham Tech, they have a GED completion program that pipelines into some college credit courses, and so especially for early education. So thinking about how do we tap into that program and collaborate with them to bring this to more Spanish-speaking Latinx background potential teachers, and also thinking about what other places around the city might be doing similar programs and what we can learn from them, and then hoping to recruit some of those members who may have access to those programs and bringing them onto the Quality Subcommittee so that they can bring their expertise there. And then the last item was in the equity plan, and we want to make sure that we're implementing the equity plan. So the other one is support the development of anti-racist pre-K curriculum for Durham pre-K classrooms. And while we just had mainly a brainstorming session about curriculums out there or ones that we would develop, one thing that we wanted to make sure that we were intentional about and always thought about was that any new curriculum isn't providing a burden on already stressed and, strained pre-K teachers. So also thinking that trainings would not be excessive and also costs would not be excessive, so that we make sure that any curriculum, anti-racist curriculum, is not prohibitive to low resource programs. So that is what we did. It was more brainstorming, and we hope in the next couple of months to bring back to the governance committee some solid strategies and guidance from you all on which ones to execute on or what to move forward with in the future.
Thanks, Marina. I know that we're actively recruiting some additional members of the quality subcommittee. And I know that's a priority for us to be sure that we're engaging with all of our constituencies. And of course, any governance member that's interested in that is not already participating in the quality subcommittee, we certainly invite you to join that subcommittee. The equity plan was quite an investment of time for this group last year, and quite a bit of work was done to study the issues in depth. And I think that we want to assure that we're using it as a dynamic document, that we're constantly addressing those priorities and looking for ways to really remove barriers for our families. So thanks a lot. Next, we're going to hear from Jenna again and Brittany Gregory, who's the Director of Programs at Durham's Partnership for Children, about our outreach work and the upcoming parent event. I don't know which one of you want to go first. Brittany, would you like to?
Yeah, I can go first. No problem. So on February 5th, we will have, we are working with our Durham PreK partners to host a family info session, and Jenna did mention a little bit about this in her update, but taking lessons learned from last year, we are going over, yes, how to complete the application, but also emphasizing key dates and a timeline of notification, so that way families have an understanding of how long it will be between the time that they apply to when they can expect to hear back about the child selection. So during the session, there will be, and like I said, an overview of the application, an explanation of each program setting, highlighting key dates, a timeline of the process, and then what we're doing differently this year is that we have breakout sessions. And so in those breakout sessions, there will be a room for general questions, 2 separate rooms about specific documentation, another room about enrollment and selection, and then Durham Public Schools will also have a room where they can answer questions. So right now, between the 2 sessions, we have 103 individuals that have registered so far. So we hope that that number will continue to go up, and we'll continue to work with our community partners to help get the word out. But we are looking forward to kicking off the application season. And I know last year we had over 200 families attend between the 2 sessions. So hopefully we'll have a little bit more this year. Thank you.
That's awesome that there are so many. Appreciate that. So Jenna, you want to talk in general about our outreach efforts? We appreciate your information about all the things that are going on with all the partners.
Yes, thank you, Brittany, for going over this info session further. We're also doing a social media blitz day, and that's why we wanted to show you these graphics. So hopefully you'll be seeing them in your news feed or on stories of accounts that you follow. Brittany, I don't remember off the top of my head when that day is, but we're asking community partners to sort of, flood their stories and their pages with this graphic to kind of help spread the word for this event.
The social media blitz day will be February 8th, the same day as the application application opening.
Oh, for the application opening. Okay, gotcha. So I also wanted to let everyone know to look out for yard signs and flyers. Tosh is going to be working on getting those out. We're also looking into a pizza box flyer campaign, where, you know, like a flyer would be taped to a pizza box. I don't know if you all have seen those before, but we figured since it's Super Bowl season coming up, that's a great time to do that. We are also gearing up for Roll Up and Enroll. So those are being offered March through June or July. Each partner is taking turns hosting, and CCSA is hosting the first one in March. And those sessions are really just an opportunity for families to come and get any support that they may need with their applications, particularly around supporting documentation if they're having any trouble uploading them. But we're just trying to offer a variety of ways for, you know, to support families with getting those applications in. And we'll have, you know, some vendors and snacks and some music and kind of make it, you know, a good time as well. And it will be outside and follow COVID protocols. I think that is most of what I had.
Okay, thank you, Jenna. You know, you guys will recall that with our opening of the application, with it all being virtual, we know that for some families that can be a barrier. People all have different needs. So you'll recall we have multiple methods. We have appointments available for people to have someone assist them with their application. We definitely have the option for people just to do it independently through the online portal. But the feeling was that we want to have as many ways as possible for families to drop off forms, drop off their verification information if they don't feel like they can upload it. You know, we don't want the technology to in any way represent a concern or a problem. And we were very excited through our facilitated meetings with the partner agencies this year. We've focused a lot on how we can have each agency really engage, because even though the events will be very similar, the fact is that each agency will take turns being the lead agency. And I think that, you know, having that collaboration is really critical for making sure that we really touch families across the entire county. So the application opening is very exciting. Hard to believe that we're opening up, that we're already looking at, you know, next year's school year. But we want to make sure that families go ahead and register early so we can really move the program forward easier. It's much easier for us when people register early, but we are definitely addressing the feedback we received from families so that when they do register early, they don't feel like they're in the no man's land of not knowing what's happening with their application. So there's a lot of feedback. So thanks for that update with the outreach. I think that the outreach committee, just for governance members' information, the outreach committee is a very robust committee that has representation from all the main partners and also engages with our other community partners. And that outreach committee obviously has a big job to make sure that we're telling the story of why that public preschool experience makes a difference for our children's school readiness and social emotional development. So I appreciate that. Okay, Katie, we'll move to the next slide. Well, in the chat, Beth was saying, you know, is there a social media blurb that we would like for partners and governance members to share? Yes, we will. There are many things in the works, and we will make sure to push out to you some easy to use sessions and information. So our outreach team has talked a lot about having tools that are easily accessible for people to get the word out. And we'll make sure that governance is included on that. Beth, I know you did a lot last year to help us elevate the application process with your organization. Would you share a little bit about the kind of ways that you've tried to push out information about the program? Do you mind?
No, I don't mind at all. And I think people are really excited to get it. We've been, posting it in the various parent groups across the city. We put it out in our Facebook group. We had tweeted it out. I've been sharing it in comments, and parents, when parents are talking about needing things for their 4-year-olds. So I think that a lot of it has just been online social media. I think last year we actually did an action alert out to our members, letting them know about it. And I saw the one that I put in the chat. I've seen it out there in other places, but I wasn't sure if that was the official language you all would like us to be using. But I do feel like people, especially the info session, I'm really excited about that. And when there's one in English and in Spanish, we do have Spanish language media as well, and have worked with partners to try to pop those out too. So I just want to make sure that we schedule it into our social media planning to make sure it gets out.
Yes, so we will get that to you very quickly, because it's been developed already. So we'll make sure that it goes out to all governance members in case you have an opportunity to share within your networks. And, organizations that interface so much, especially, your group, Beth. I mean, I think Moms Rising is such a critical advocate for early childhood services. We just so appreciate all the ways that you've helped us get that information out. That's one of the things that we don't want to only rely on social media. Obviously, we've done things like we have placards in all of the Durham transit buses. Of course, with the pandemic, some of the ridership's been up and down with public transport, but those placards are an important information source, especially if you're riding that bus on a regular basis. They're in every bus. And that's a big financial investment, but we feel like it's a strong way to have that captive audience looking at that placard on a regular basis. But we're always looking for better ways to really permeate the social media world, but also ideas that are more, I guess, traditional, you would call it. I think the pizza box was a way for the committee to think outside of the box. We have in the past also done some, grocery store ads, cinema ads, and also we have done some ads on some medication bags through the pharmacies with varying results. Obviously we're open to trying a lot of different things. So if you have ideas about that, I hope you'll share them, because our team is very creative, but we can always use new ideas. Okay, so we still don't have a quorum, so just wanted to give that touch point. But the what we'll do is follow up with those members who couldn't come to make sure that they get the information, and of course the recording will be available for them. We'll just continue and keep an eye, and if we do get a quorum, we'll go back to approve those notes, and to we have a future vote we were considering later in the meeting, but it is not urgent for a vote for this meeting. It can be done in the March meeting. So okay, so we'll move on and talk about our teacher qualifications and pay raises. And if I'll let you know that Joy Turner, who works with CCSA, who's the Data and Provider Services Director at CCSA, is joined us in the meeting today in case you ask me some questions that I have no idea the answer. She's going to be our resource. But basically, I just wanted to update you about where we are with pay raises and teacher qualifications for the program. Currently, in our Durham PreK program, this year there are 34 Durham PreK teachers. 24 of those have their full BK license and an average of 9.8 years of experience. And, our goal obviously is to be a program that attracts the best teachers. And we're excited about new teachers, but we're also excited to recruit and retain those seasoned teachers. So we're always really interested in making sure that we track and follow how we're doing in terms of teacher experience. You'll recall at our last meeting, we talked about the state budget that finally passed. I think we would all agree that the raises for teachers were disappointing. Well, I'm editorializing, but that I was disappointed with the raises. But I wanted to let you know that in keeping with our program guidelines, where we require that all programs, regardless of auspice, pay on the Durham Public School scale for our teachers. We do monitor for that, and we do assure that teachers are paid accurately based on their license and their licensing experience. In the media, they talk about different percentages for teacher raises, but it's a little bit misleading because those of you who are familiar with teacher pay scale in North Carolina, there are all these experience steps, and in North Carolina, a lot of times, depending on how much experience you have, many years it's implemented differently across the experience steps, how much raise you'll get. And so the North Carolina budget this year gave both a raise to each experience level and a raise allowing the step increases. So, that doesn't always happen. Previously, someone with a 1 year of experience was still making what someone with 0 years of experience made last year. And that's because the budget has to approve a raise and allowance for those teachers to move up a step. So sometimes there's misalignment with experience and where a teacher's being paid, and it can be quite complex. There were not increases in the Durham local supplement, except for those that were related to allowing the step increase. So basically the effect on the scale is shown here, where there's not an across the board increase. There's varying amounts, which you can see here, the 1% raise for base level teachers, 4% in the first year to 8 years of experience, and then subsequently 3%, disappointingly 1% for those teachers with 16 to 24 years, and then 5% once they get to 25 years of experience, and then 1% for 26 plus. The way we're implementing that is that Joy and her team are providing support for providers. And, obviously the public schools, they implement their scale with their HR department and have the resources to assure that happens. But in our private providers, this is a very different scale than some of them are used to. So Joy and her team provide support for the sites if they need any help calculating the new salary, because the other thing is that these raises are retro to the beginning of the school year. So we asked that all Durham PreK sites implement their pay raises this month, and they have to, by the end of January, they have to turn in documentation, pay stub documentation, that we can then monitor to assure that it was implemented correctly. If it's not, we can work with them to fix that. But they have to show that they made the change in the salary and are paying the back pay. We have not had, to my knowledge, any negative feedback from sites about this. We have been telling them all along, reminding them that there would be a teacher pay change and that they needed to plan for that in their budgeting. Now, our teacher support payment that each site gets to help pay for their experienced teacher, those teacher support payments will also go back and pay retro. So they'll be getting some additional help to make those retro payments and to adjust the teacher's salary moving forward. Does anybody have any questions about that? All right. Well, we're really appreciative to Joy and her team for providing that support to providers, because I think, we don't want them to feel burdened by all of the administrivia. So, and we're excited at least that teachers are getting raises. We obviously hoped for a bit more of a robust raise for them. So, okay, let's move to the next slide. So I just wanted to revisit for a few minutes. I wanted to remind you that we have, at our last meeting, we had talked a lot about priorities, and you had identified some priorities for funding requests. We did work with IOMA to prepare a letter from governance to go to the county manager and the county commissioners requesting consideration for increased funding for Durham PreK. And we were invited to make a presentation to the county commission, which we did on January 4th at the work session. And in that, we did an update for them and talked about the commitment that's been made in Durham. And we wanted to, because obviously time has passed, the pandemic has impacted everything, and we have new commissioners who were not in place when Durham PreK was started. We did do a very broad and brief overview to reconnect with Durham's vision. You know, Durham County's invested millions in local funds to create this universal preschool program. And you'll be reminded that Durham PreK's whole purpose is to enhance and expand those services, those public services that were already available. And of course, to really prioritize the highest quality. We do still prioritize children living in low income households, but we do have a universal model where no child is made ineligible for this program. So it's just a key factor we want to just revisit for in thinking about it. You know, our key investment areas, you know, really include funding those preschool seats, providing the whole point, providing increased access to economic opportunity and professional development for those preschool teachers. And really that investment that the county's making in quality improvement so that we can build capacity to continue to improve. It was really exciting. Yesterday we had a staff meeting and some team members from our technical assistance team were reporting on the quality improvement efforts to the group. And it was really exciting to hear about some of the providers who are receiving technical assistance that are not currently offering Durham PreK for the purpose of building our capacity in Durham. And I think that the big assignment comes from reaching deep into the early childhood community to improve quality across the board. Can you move to the next slide? So you'll remember that our overall goals is improving that quality and improving access. And all of our planning came out of the early education task force, community task force. And those recommendations in 2017, governance has held close to, you know, making Durham PreK supportive of working families, you know, developing the program as a universal program for 4-year-olds, and really making sure that teachers are at the center of our change model and providing those resources up to, you know, those resources to lift our teachers up. Okay, if you'll move to the next slide. So just to remind you of why, you know, let's revisit this why. In 2017, you'll recall that we were commissioned to do a supply and demand study by the county at the recommendation of that community early education task force. And we really found that there was a shortage of publicly funded preschool seats. The lack of supply really affected preschoolers from those low income households the most severely. And we at that time learned that the preschool seats could only accommodate 1 out of every 6 children from low income households. So that really meant that at that time, 83% of children who needed access to preschool the most were being left out. And I think, you know, that grounded all of our work. From that information, Durham pledged to develop incrementally our universal access to public preschool. And you'll recall that our funding priority is to increase seats for 4-year-olds living in households with low income, but we've made a plan, a desire to build seats for 75% in the long run, to build seats for 75% of the 4-year-old census. And in 2021, that census was a little over 4,300 children. And this is just important for us to always revisit and keep in mind, because it's foundational to why we're doing what we're doing. Next slide. So where are we with enrollment? We get asked this question all the time. We talk about it pretty much at every meeting, but I want to emphasize that we know the pandemic has changed our plans, but it has not changed our long-term goals. There's been so much concern about enrollment given the health concerns of the pandemic. Enrollment is down overall across all of our partner agency programs, NC PreK, Head Start, and Durham Public Schools. But specifically for Durham PreK in the current school term, the number of children enrolled is higher than pre-pandemic numbers, but it's only at 86% of the available Durham PreK seats. So this compares to the pre-pandemic enrollment that was at 97% of available seats. And so, overall, we feel that interest and enrollment is strong given the reality of the pandemic and the concerns that families have for obvious reasons. So, yes, we have increased the number of overall seats, continuing with our priority of braiding those seats. So let's talk about that overall braiding if you'll move to the next slide. So what's really important is how are we doing, in terms of building out our seat capacity and how things are looking. And I always want to say up front that this is quite a task to identify and deduplicate and cleanly identify seats, because when you're braiding, it's very complex. Durham PreK, we require braiding of the multiple funding streams wherever possible. You'll remember that we are always saying, people get tired of me saying Durham County money spent last, because our local investments really are there to leverage resources from other places. In the current year, 66% of the Durham PreK seats are funded from multiple funding sources. So we're braiding together resources for 66% of the Durham PreK seats. This school term, there are 53 sites that have at least one publicly supported 4-year-old classroom, and that's across the whole system. 20 of those sites are contracted to meet the higher quality standards set by Durham PreK. So you recall that we are serving children in multiple ways. And in trying to determine the overall number of children that are actually served through public dollars in the 4-year-old environment, in the 4-year-old classroom environment, I want to be sure it's clear that this chart does not reflect those children that are served through Durham Public Schools Exceptional Children's Services outside of a public preschool classroom. So there are children who are 4 who are being served through federal dollars that have exceptional children strategies and plans, and they're being served at their environment. So if they're going to a half-day preschool somewhere, then a resource person is going to them to work with them. It's a part-time intervention type arrangement. This chart does not reflect those children. So there's a smaller number of 4-year-olds that are not reflected here that are getting public support services. But this chart does reflect children who are receiving exceptional children's services in a preschool day program. So the 10-month school day. So when it says here, Durham Public Schools, braided Title I, exceptional children, Durham PreK, NC PreK, that 614 number, that reflects Durham Public Schools service to 4-year-olds that is blended across many classrooms and may be blended with any combination of funds from within those programs that are listed in the brackets there. So a child may be paid for with Title I money and Durham PreK money if it's a Durham PreK classroom. They may be funded with NC PreK money and Title I money. It's any combination of braid does exist. That other line where it says Durham Public Schools Exceptional Children's Program not braided, those are children in classrooms that are receiving extensive intensive services that are federally funded completely. And our Head Start program, Head Start is fully engaged with Durham PreK and also with NC PreK, as well as their Head Start resources. And so the children that they serve in our count, we consider them to all be fully braided. So the individual child payment at Head Start may not reflect a braid, but the Head Start program overall, any child that's in the Head Start program, we consider to be braided. And that helps us when we are trying to deduplicate children. We're trying to keep it really as clean as possible to get an accurate count. So I know this is kind of, I'm describing this deeply into the weeds, but the reality is, my message is that to the best of our ability, based on the data we have access to, based on the fact that it's a dynamic number. So, for example, these numbers were pulled at the beginning of December. They are already different now on January 20th, because in particular, our application is still open and some families can still join mid-year, but also the Exceptional Children program is federally mandated to always accept children on a rolling basis when they're identified as having needs. So it is very dynamic, and we will finalize the overall number of children served in public preschool seats at the end of the fiscal year. We'll have a final number, but this is where we were from the data pulled at the beginning of December. So before I move to just talking about our growth over the years, I want to make sure I just do a check. Does anybody have any questions about this?
No, I think this is great, Linda. I think because it just shows sort of that there's a lot of different ways, right, for children to be served. And the fact that a little bit over 10% is just is DPK only, not braided, but the majority are in some level of other funded supports. I think that speaks to sort of a huge thing that we shouldn't ignore, and how to continue moving that forward, even as we sort of deal with all the potential loss of seats, that we like the fewer kids who are in seats. But I think this is really good.
Thanks. Are there any other questions about that? Okay. Katie, can you go back a slide for a minute? So going back to this slide, just for perspective, I just want to show. So when we say Durham PreK only, that means a site that's fully funding those seats with Durham PreK money. Currently, that Durham PreK only, we have 2 classrooms that are standalone, fully filled with Durham PreK children. And then we have Durham PreK only seats sprinkled across a bunch of other seats. And so now if you go forward to the next slide, when we look at this chart, and it has on there Durham Public Schools braided, and you see that DPK is in that list. That's because the public schools braid with Durham PreK money. You see that we're braiding with Head Start, and we're braiding with NC PreK. Okay, next slide. So this is fun. For those of us who've been around a long time, it's a lot of fun to think about. When the board, well, first I want to say that the pictures from today's presentation were taken in December at Durham PreK sites. And so these are new pictures of our kids. Should have said that at the very beginning. But the reason we go back to 2015-16 as our baseline is because that is when the Pre-K Task Force subcommittee for finance, you'll recall, those of you around will remember that the Pre-K Task Force had 5 subcommittees that had quite robust participation. Quality subcommittee of that task force, for example, had over 50 people on it. But the finance subcommittee of the task force did a lot of work to try to nail down how many children were actually being served at that time. And so we're not comfortable using any of the data that we have from other years. We're comfortable starting with the 2015-16 work of the task force. So at that time, there were 811 public preschool seats. That was inclusive of the EC, not inclusive of those children receiving specialized services in whatever setting they were already in, but it is inclusive of the exceptional children that were at that time being served in full day classrooms. So, this is something to really be proud of, and our growth trajectory has not been as strong as we want because the pandemic has derailed it some, but we have made great progress. And I think that it just really shows what you can do when you're intentional. The local money is not paying for this growth, all of this growth. The local money is leveraging other money to achieve this growth. And I think that what I'm personally the most excited about and proud about is that if more investments come from the feds in the future, Durham is positioned and at a much higher readiness level than many communities to take advantage of those new dollars and meet our growth goals through outside funding. So this is an important slide, and it's also an important slide because it shows our main partners. This is a collaborative, and Durham PreK is an umbrella term for our full public preschool initiative across all resources in Durham. Okay, any other questions about that? We're going to talk about our budget forecast next, but anybody have any other questions? Okay, well, we'll leave this sweet face and move to the next slide. So from your breakout groups last time and from our meeting with the commissioners, we were asked when we presented January 4th, we were asked to talk about what kind of growth and what kind of money we were looking for. Of course, that's really hard because we will take as much money as they'll give us and make sure that we're serving children. But we wanted to take in all the information and figure out what was realistic. So going back to the original goal and not trying to adjust for the census at that time, our figures estimated for planning have been built toward having seats for 75% of the 4-year-old census. And so based on the current figures, that 4-year-old census, of course, has grown, and 75% currently would be 3,343 seats. But we have stuck our budget forecast to trying to reach that goal of 3,268 seats. So we're at 46% of goal. Well, that sounds kind of low, but we're pleased with it, but we know we want more. So we asked the commissioners to recommit to a growth goal for Durham PreK. Because obviously, if we have a commitment, it's easier to plan and build over time. So we did really ask them to consider looking at it as our goal of adding around 100 seats a year. Now you'll recall that because we're braiding funding, I can't say, you know, we're going to add 100 seats and it's going to cost this. It's a range. Typically, when we're planning, because if you braid more, you spend less per child of your local dollars. So then you can serve more children. So it all depends on your opportunity for braiding and, of course, local capacity. But we believe that realistically, 100 seats a year is doable. Certainly, we would take more if the resources come, but we believe 100 seats a year is very realistic. For the meeting with the commissioners, and we asked for that, I will report back that it was a very positive reception. I mean, obviously, a lot of things can happen, but the commissioners were all very positive about having a, repledging to this program, prioritizing this program, and planning for growth. And so that was very heartening to have that recommitment, especially given that we have newer commissioners. So when this chart that just says budget forecast, so our current fiscal year, you'll recall that our budget's divided between what we call instructional services and what we call the management services. The management services are inclusive of all of our support efforts and paying for the technology for the online portal and all the very expensive things that go on. So when you're thinking about a growth analysis, right now we're at around a little over 27% of our overall budget goes to the management. The rest goes to instructional services. Now, the instructional services category includes our payments for teachers and everything. So I always like to be really clear that the instructional part of the budget goes as a pass-through to the sites to support the classrooms, the seats, the teachers, the teacher support payments, and those parts of our budget are really critical to meeting the needs of the children and families. Now, remember that you waived the attendance and enrollment. So during the pandemic, we've been paying on allocation. And so the instructional services component of the budget has been more stable because we're paying whether a child is attending or not because of the pandemic. That's unusual and obviously won't continue forever. So forecasting is also challenging in that way. But the bottom line is that the request to add additional 100 seats also, those are not the only needs. The quality subcommittees identified, these barriers that are really big barriers like transportation and RAP care for families. And included in our request for additional funding are initiatives to pilot a RAP care initiative that would pay for the most needy families to access RAP. We do access RAP, and let me go back and say that RAP is before and after school care, just to make sure everybody knows what we're talking about when we say RAP. But it is expensive for families to pay for RAP care. It's expensive for providers to offer RAP care, because you'll recall that they can't use existing staff, existing teachers or teachers' assistants to provide that RAP care because we require them to give their teachers and teachers' assistants planning time. So this budget forecast includes some piloting of different initiatives for our requests for fiscal year 23. But beyond that, we're really looking to try to grow seats. And this budget forecast didn't land with a thud. I will say that I was sort of thinking to myself, well, gosh darn, maybe we should have asked for more. Because, they didn't run screaming from the room when they saw the numbers. But I think that really that's a testament to the work that's been done to try to be reasonable, be thoughtful, and be very data informed in making decisions about how much to ask for. So I'll be quiet and see if anybody has questions.
Well, you can just see the comments is really obviously impressive growth and that sort of stuff. So
Well, I do think that the conundrum we face with transportation is huge. And we have, asked for funds based on your guidance. We've asked for funds for transportation study. We have very little transportation in this county. Many counties do have some transportation, but in Durham, we have a very low transportation for our 4-year-old preschool children. So. Okay, we are moving toward a break. Our next, if you'll move to the next slide, it shows our break. We're a few minutes ahead of schedule. If you want to, it's up to you if you want to move forward or to take the break. What is your pleasure?
can we take a 5-minute break? Be back at 10:35, please. We'll be back 10:35. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
All right, I think we come back together. And then Linda, just check if we have quorum. I know if we
Yeah, I
need,
just checked. We're still one person short for our quorum.
okay, did you count
so-
Lee in that one? Did you count Lee?
I did.
Okay, okay.
I counted Lee and I counted Sharon, who had to step out and is coming back and forth. So we're
Yep.
we're one person short.
Okay.
The good thing is, fortunately, I mean, we did have a lot of last minute people who let us know they couldn't come, but fortunately we don't have a time sensitive vote. So we can defer votes until our March meeting, and we will be absolutely vigilant to make sure we have our quorum. This is the first meeting in our several year program that we haven't had a quorum. So I'm glad that this is not a common occurrence, but we know how busy people are.
Absolutely.
Linda, did you also include Michael Page? 'Cause
I
he-
did count him. What I'm counting right now is that we have 11 voting members. We have more than 11 members here, but we have 11 voting members here and we need 12. And, you know, if you can go behind me and double check, I'd love to be wrong, but I've counted a bunch of times. So I think we're still one person short.
But like
I
you said,
have-
there's not a lot of pressing votes needed right now. So I think.
Yes, fortunately. And, you know, I have gotten, while we've been meeting, I've gotten several emails from people who had last minute unexpected things that came up. So, you know, we will hope for them to be well, and we'll look forward to seeing them at the next meeting. Okay, Katie, you want to move to the next slide? So Jen and I are going to talk about information about the hazard bonus pay. You'll recall that last school year, we were very concerned about our teachers working in person, and we wanted to convey to them our support. And we did that by, you did that by recommending to the county that we do a hazard bonus pay. Governance asked permission for that, and we did receive permission to use some of our funding to make that payment. And those payments went to both teachers and teacher assistants. And that's a critical piece. And we did not differentiate. We paid them the same, teachers and teachers assistants. We paid them the same bonus. The amount of their bonus was based upon how much of the year they worked in person. So we broke it down into two payment categories. So we did want to get follow-up information from them. It cost us, basically we spent around $100,000 making these payments. And we felt it was important to get feedback from them. So I'm going to ask Jenna to share with you just the information about the survey we did of them recently.
Thanks, Linda. So in November, we surveyed the teachers and assistants who received the bonus payments, and we had about 40% of recipients who completed the survey. And as Linda mentioned, the amount they received was based on the amount of time that they worked in person in DPK classrooms, and you can see the range of the payments right there. And Katie, if you want to advance to the next slide. Thank you. So these were our most significant findings. 96% were working in the same pre-K site as they were at the end of last school year, so that was great. 96% said that they felt more appreciated and recognized for their work. They felt more satisfied with their job. 100% said that it helped ease their financial stress, so that was great to hear. And then 80% said that the payment encouraged them to stay with their current program. And Katie, if you want to advance to the next slide, please. Thank you. And then this slide is just is a chart showing how folks used their bonus payment. And as you can see, the majority of staff use the bonus to help pay bills and basic family needs, childcare, and while some others were able to put it towards their savings or use it for recreation. Yeah, and that's pretty much a summary of our findings.
I do think that, we're in this place again with the pandemic. Unfortunately, we're not in a post-pandemic world. And this information is important as we consider where our most important team members are at, in their economic reality and the strain and stress that they're under. Katie, can you move to the next slide? So what we wanted to do, and we won't be voting on this today, but we wanted to put it forth for for consideration and discussion from the group about where we are presently in our thinking about whether or not we want to consider a hazard pay bonus this year. The way that you passed it last year was you said that any gap in spending in instructional services would be used to make a hazard payment. We didn't set an amount until we knew how much money would be available. We made those payments in June because that's the end of the fiscal year and we would know how much money would be available. What I will say for our spending forecast, there's several things going on. The first is that the raise was less for teachers than we expected, as I already mentioned in our report out about the raises. And so the money we set aside in anticipation of having to pay more for the teacher support payments to the providers, we have some money that will not be expended that we had set aside for that. In addition, we've had a situation with the pandemic where when we made our allocations, you recall we've already mentioned and reminded you that we're paying on allocation rather than enrollment. However, we can only pay on allocation if there's an allocation, obviously. And what I mean by that is we had two sites that were given in their allocation originally were allocated more seats than they are getting paid for now. And that is because the site made a decision to close that classroom permanently for the year because of the strain of the pandemic. So we have two programs that are under contract to offer Durham PreK that closed entirely their classroom that we had budgeted for. And so that means that we know, even though we're paying on allocation, we do know that we are not going to be at 100% of spending. We don't know fully yet what that money will look like for sure, but we do know we will have unexpended money. So we felt it was important to bring forth to you consideration for your discussion of whether you want to do a hazard payment again, or if you are interested in some other support method. We have had in different breakout groups, people have talked about whether or not there should be a hazard payment to the site for the classroom. You'll recall the state has started paying stabilization grants. And I've had some people say to me, well, the state's doing stabilization grants, so for Durham PreK, we shouldn't, try to do that. I think that we know the reality is that Durham PreK is a much more demanding program and has much higher standards and has been operating in person throughout. You'll recall last year they were both in person and virtual. This year they've been in person throughout so far. So we just wanted to bring it to you for some input and discussion. We can wait until March for any vote on if you want to make any sort of payments.
Linda, can we go back a slide? I think it's really
Yes.
important that people, I don't know, I thought that slide was quite telling. And I think we ought to, recognize really what people use that money for during this pandemic. And so I'm not a voting member, but I am in full support. I'm not sure I'm allowed to actually say that, but
No, I mean, I think it's important that all of our members weigh in and discuss it, not just voting members. Anna Gaspin Pines is a voting member and has her hand raised also.
Hi, everyone. Thank you. Thank you so much for showing this data. I just want to say, first of all, that I completely agree with Marcia. I think this is really important for us to see, and underscores for me the importance of supporting additional hazard pay. So as a voting member, next time when we do have a quorum, I want to preview that I would be in full support of that. I do also want to say, just I think being here representing Duke University, Sanford School of Public Policy, and the Center for Child and Family Policy, I also just want to quickly add there was a really excellent study conducted by colleagues at the University of Virginia that showed that when early childhood teachers received a bonus payment, they were actually less likely to leave their position. And so when we think about stability of the teaching workforce and how important that is, and strategies for reducing turnover, coupled with this wonderful analysis that Jenna shared, that really says to me that this is a very important thing for us to be doing.
Thanks for that input. Drew's got his hand up. And so does Kathy. Drew and then Kathy.
Good morning, everybody. Another thing that struck me, I think last week, I was on a call with a bunch of city and county managers from the Triangle area who were all talking about the cost of living adjustments and so forth that they're giving their employees. And that was about the same time that the Consumer Price Index, sort of inflation information for 2021 came out. It was 7% for last year, for that sort of bundle of goods that goes into that calculation, right? And so another way of thinking about this is just helping them keep up with inflation, and it won't even be enough, right? So effectively, they will all still be getting a pay cut, which is depressing to think about, but whatever we call it, right? Having a little bit of leftover money, I think distributing it will help stabilize things a little bit. So I think that's a good idea.
Kathy?
Yes to all of that. So I think I am in full support of this hazard pay, and I can just share anecdotally. My students who are working at centers that have received the stabilization grant, and then folks that I know that received hazard pay previously, it has made a huge difference, and it has kept them in their jobs. We need to do whatever we can to keep people teaching right now because they are leaving in droves. So yeah, I fully support this, and I want us to be careful to make sure that this goes straight to the teachers and not to the center. The stabilization grant is wonderful and it's doing good stuff, but these two are very separate issues, and I think we just need to make sure that we're supporting the teachers as much as we can.
That's a great point. I didn't clarify that. So we do our monthly teacher support payments. That payment does go to the center, and we monitor that they are paying the teacher correctly. This was different. This was, we did centrally from CCSA, we paid the teachers directly this one payment. So that we did that last year, and certainly because it's at the end of the fiscal year and we are at the mercy of all the different financial deadlines, for a practical stance, it's an important thing also that we would just pay them directly rather than trying to figure out how to have time to pay the site and monitor that the money went to the teacher. So we would, if it was passed for this type of payment, we would pay the teacher directly. June has her hand up.
Yes, good morning. As a provider, I guess I can't really express quite how it's been working in childcare for the last nearly 2 years now. It's absolutely incredibly stressful. You don't know from day to day quite what's going to happen, and especially since Christmas, this last 2 weeks with the Omicron variant has been very challenging. I'm not sure I can vote on this because I should think it's a conflict of interest, but I highly support whatever you can do to support these teachers financially. They need the money. They really don't get paid that well. And it's evident from this graph that, you know, they're using the money mainly to just keep going to pay their bills. So whatever you can do, I fully support. It makes people feel better. It makes them feel that they're encouraged. It makes them feel that somebody cares and that somebody's looking out for them. So it's incredibly important. Thank you.
Appreciate that feedback. Does anybody else want to weigh in?
I'd like to point out this was the one conversation that clearly there's a lot of support. I mean, it almost feels like, of course, it should be. I think it also sort of speaks to this larger issue of, I think, of course, we'll support a bonus pay, at least when we will, hopefully that's what the vote will be. But I think it also brings up the larger point of, right, this bonus and is actually like your baseline salary, right? So this in essence is really a gap filler, but it's really about, we have to continue to think about how do we continue to, you know, support the workforce in a way that really ensure that they really are both being paid and valued, right? Is that combination of being paid and valued. And I think it's, you know, this is one of the ways, and we have to continue to think about how do we value fully our early childhood workforce, our professionals, in ways that, like I think June just said, they're not leaving in droves as we're seeing all across the state, but also the country. I think, yeah, this is like, of course, we can support a hazard bonus pay. And Linda, do you see, because we don't have a vote on this yet, do you, since obviously we don't need to, but it's something that we want to probably put on the books for March, correct?
Yes, given the support that's been expressed, we will put it as an agenda item for the March meeting. And of course, by then we will have some additional information about where our teachers are, but we can definitely put it on the March agenda. And I saw that you entered into the chat the address for the study that I believe Anna was referencing.
Yeah, the study. Mm-hmm.
It is, for those of you who are really interested, it is a very interesting report. I did hear her give us talk about it, and it had a lot of very interesting information about the role incentives play, and even information about how you structure incentives can also make a difference. So it is it's an interesting study that was done. I appreciate y'all bringing it forth for the group's information. We'll make sure that the link that's in the chat will also get put into the meeting notes.
And Linda, I'll just add, I mean, it's a little tangential. I mean, I also think it's important that we continue to sort of communicate, right, the power of paying, you know, early educators, because I think, you know, people, I think even this data, people assume, oh, you pay somebody a bonus and they'll go just blow it on because you're making so much money. And I think this, making sure people understand that when you're really taking a bonus pay to pay for your basic life necessities like water and food, right? That tells you the amount of money or lack thereof we have given them, especially this pandemic, but even before the pandemic. So I feel like we need to, I think in some ways, maybe it's really us as a governance committee, I think we need to make sure that people really understand that, you know, there's probably, unless we pay them extraordinarily a large amount of money, that we're going to continue to have a workforce that's still struggling for the basic resources. And I can't imagine why we should have these large expectations of what a program can be and the potential outcomes if we literally have professionals who are still struggling on a day-to-day basis for like water and food. And I think we just cannot just not talk about the level that they are subsidizing some of our own well-being. So I just feel like we need to just understand they are subsidizing us to be able to work and to be able to do everything and even play and have fun in some regards. So it just is disturbing that we are seeing where they're putting their money in.
Thanks for that. Drew, you had your hand up.
Just a kind of a quick follow-up on that. I think I noticed when we were talking to the commissioners that we were showing them sort of a possible progression of funding, but didn't attach a particular number of seats to that, at least not in the slides. And I think in a way, kind of tying to this conversation, that leaves the option open, right, for us to kind of determine how much, whatever, 1.3, 1.7 million in a given year pay for, if we are also intent to this current conversation on further raising pay and stabilizing our providers' situations. It's kind of an interesting and difficult trade-off sometimes, but I think in the long run, we reap what we sow. And if we only pay for a really unstable, skin of our teeth provider situation, that's what we're going to get. And so, I think, it remains our task to kind of, assuming we get some of that funding, and even if we don't, right, to formulate kind of how we intend to spend what we do get. Thanks.
Beth, you had your hand up?
Yeah, I just wanted to note that I think that particularly, I hate that we're going to be delayed till March. I understand why that's the case, but with the elimination of the child tax credit and so many of our providers being parents themselves, it really, I know it can't be helped at this point, but I do know families are really feeling that loss right now.
That's an excellent point. And I also, Drew mentioned the possibility that this group might really look at this issue in an ongoing way. I mean, we've responded to the pandemic by identifying this opportunity to give teachers bonuses, but it sounds like we might want to explore options for further supporting teachers, and we can review some opportunities and come back to this group with more information for you to consider in the arena of teacher compensation. So what we will do is for sure put it on the agenda for the March meeting. And that's probably, last year we didn't tell the teachers they were getting it, and because of a whole host of reasons. But at that time in March, we can consider what type of notice we feel comfortable giving to teachers. Marcia, you had your hand up?
I was just wondering whether our policies have any way of voting via electronically.
It's not prohibited. It's not prohibited in our bylaws. That would be up to y'all. If you want us to prepare an electronic vote, we can certainly do so. And Drew just put a question in the chat about whether the payments would be approximately the same size. What we were looking at was a range. The difference would be this year that everyone's been in person all year, so there wouldn't be a lower payment amount. So what we were looking at was examining whether we could potentially pay between $2,000 and $2,500 per person, and that was the range that we were studying. So approximately the same size as the larger amount, but they would not, because they've been working all year, every classroom, there wouldn't be a differentiation in the amount unless someone joined the program late. We would prorate that. So Kate mentioned in the chat about the fact that teacher pay and compensation is a really high priority for the Early Childhood Action Plan Steering Committee, and then Kate was also saying, that it might be a good idea to consider an electronic vote so that teachers could potentially be notified and be relieved of some of their stress. We couldn't pay the bonus until June, but if they knew it was coming, that certainly might help with their stress. Anybody else have any questions or comments or concerns? Beth, your hand's up. Was that from before?
So Kate, I don't know if you saw in the chat, Kate was wondering, especially in response to maybe Beth's comment too, would we be able to go ahead and approve via email or vote and right? Is that something that we want to consider?
We can certainly do that if it's not prohibited in our bylaws.
And would you need a quorum or 100% of the governance committee?
Our bylaws call for a simple majority of voting members for anything to pass.
So and so would the question be, so then would it be that Linda and team, you guys can draft a proposal based on this conversation and send an email for a vote? Okay.
Yeah, what we would do is just, obviously the notes from the meeting would inform people, but we would make people aware. And so what would have to happen would be that we would have to first have a vote to allow a vote. So, but we can prepare that and work with you, to get that out. If that's
Yep,
the
that'd
way
be
you
great. Yes,
desire.
it sounds like that's what people would like to see.
Okay, and if we do that and there's not support from a quorum to vote that way, then we will definitely have it on the March agenda. But this group tends to be very progressive in its strategies, and so I would be surprised if that wasn't an acceptable option for people.
And another thing we have done before is have an ad hoc. Remember one of our meetings, if we think it's
Yes.
really critical, we can also have an ad hoc meeting and obviously say it'd be like 30 minutes and then really just get it all done. So that's another option.
Yeah, that is another option. We could call a meeting. So what are your thoughts about which would you prefer?
Well, let's do with the email because it feels like between, we can kind of figure that out, email, and then let's do that process because, trying to get a meeting with everybody at quorum could be tasking. So maybe that's a plan B for us. So let's go with the email. Thanks, Kate. So let's go with that with the email. And then if that doesn't work, we'll do our ad hoc if necessary.
Okay. Well, we'll prepare information for those who weren't here. And also, of course, you'll be able to review it again. And we'll get that moving. Thank you very much. I feel like that one of the things I'm most proud about this governance team is how much teachers are kept at the center of our work, the teachers and teachers assistants and their vital role. So it's really, I think, just the strength of the program. Okay, Katie, you want to move to the next slide and then the next one after that. Okay, so we're at the point of our meeting agenda where we're going to break into groups. We're going to have 2 groups, and this is kind of an interesting, I hope that you guys will be able to stay to participate in this discussion. So many of you are fully aware of what's going on with the Early Childhood Action Plan in Durham. There is a steering committee that's working hard to prioritize all the many components of the ECAP, the Durham ECAP. But I do serve as a member of the steering committee along with lots and lots of community folks. And one of the things that's come forth from those meetings that I feel that governance needs to be aware of and begin thinking about is that there's a lot of input and discussion around the opportunity for Durham PreK in terms of how we have structured the program, how we design and serve children. And as we are looking at expansion priorities and considerations from the ECAP, they have actually talked a lot about why we don't allow, or would we consider allowing Durham PreK to take place in different types of settings than we currently allow. You'll recall that at this time, programs must be a 5-star center licensed at a minimum. They must go through an RFA process where they are assessed. An in-person assessment is done as part of the RFA, along with all the information they must provide the RFA. They have to meet all of our guidelines, have a BK licensed teacher in the classroom, but there has been talk about the opportunity to consider allowing Durham PreK to be in family child care homes. And also there's been the discussion about it being the model, the full day model being not the only option. There's been some interest in consideration for a different structure in terms of like a part day program being able to offer Durham PreK. So we think this is very important to consider and review and study, and we do intend to bring to you information and research and information from other states about how they offer public pre-K. And we're not in any way at a place where we would be making any sort of recommendations or decisions, but we wanted to start this out by having you discuss in the breakout what your thoughts are, and also what kinds of information you would want to see brought to you for consideration. So as a starting place, we want to have these breakout sessions to talk about this issue. So we're going to have two groups. We're going to move in, and there's a Jamboard. Monty's put the Jamboard in the link. Monty, do you want to pull up? Katie, do you want to stop sharing and have Monty share the Jamboard so that you can see what that looks like? So there's a group 1 and a group 2 page on the Jamboard. They're exactly the same. And Monty, do you want to review what, I don't know what people's familiarity, we've had a Jamboard in this meeting several times, so you may be comfortable with it.
Sure. So for the Jamboard, if you look over to the left-hand side, you see all the different icons. The square icon here is a sticky note that you can click on. You can type your note into the sticky note and then hit save, and then it will show up on the Jamboard. You can move it down. There's other tools if you want to pin, you want to circle it, or if somebody wrote something that you want to second or echo, you could do a little check mark by somebody else's sticky note. But as you're working in groups, if you can put together your sticky notes, if someone could kind of arrange them, and then of course, if you can also select someone who can report back to the larger group when we come back together.
Okay, so we're going to go ahead and break out into the groups, and we will come back at 11:20, which is only 12 minutes. So maybe we better make it, let's make it 11:25. And I promise we'll end at 11:30. Obviously, we're not going to be able to share out too much, but we'll report back. Discussion's more important. I don't know about y'all, but we had some good discussion. We didn't get a chance, we didn't get a chance to designate anybody to report out. Somebody in group 1 want to report just a little bit? We have about 5 minutes, and obviously this is the very beginning of these discussions, and we'll put together information and use what you've put here to get back to you. But does anybody from group 1 want to share? Don't be shy.
We had lots of things on our group page, whatever it's called, and I think that we all really were focused on family childcare, and the cost that would be involved because family childcare is not part of the NC Pre-K, but that we could pilot family childcare and pilot it for the state, and then we were looking at. We had a lot of conversation around half day and whether we could get half day to move to be licensed, and that we need to look at other states that have already embedded other forms of care besides basic center care in their pre-K program.
So it sounds like group 2 had a good discussion. And it sounded like you talked a lot about family childcare. Jamaica, you had your hand up?
Yes, ma'am. So one of the things that stood out to me in the conversation in group 1 was that we were all thinking about monitoring and kind of trying to think about the whole picture of how we would monitor that if even with piloting early care and education in private, publicly funded pre-K in family childcare homes or half-day programs. Many of the things that Marcia just mentioned in group 2 were also discussed in group 1.
Yeah, and in group 1 also, June was talking about, the high value in many of the half-day programs. So as it's 11:27, we want to honor your time, but what we will do is we'll take your Jamboard feedback and we will structure some information. Obviously, this would not be a quick thing. We want to be thoughtful and consider all the options. So this will be the very beginning of many more discussions about this topic moving forward. So we really appreciate your time and regret that we were one person shy of our quorum today. Yoma, any closing thoughts?
No, I mean, other than thank you all for your engagement, attention, and being here and being present, and obviously your good suggestions to do sort of a vote by email. So again, thank you all, and please remain safe and take care of yourself, especially our providers who are part of our group. Thank you.
Thanks so much for your time. We'll be following up very soon, very, very quickly around the electronic vote.
Thank you.
And we'll see you guys in March.
Thank you, Lynette. Thank you, team. Bye-bye.